Hi, my name is Petri Kainulainen and this is the second part of my video tutorial which talks about the unit testing of Spring MVC controllers. This video describes how we can use the Spring MVC test framework for writing unit tests for controller methods which either renders a view or processes form submissions. By the way, if you have not watched the first part of this video tutorial, I recommend that you watch it before watching this video. Okay, let's get started. This tutorial is divided into three parts. The first part describes how we can get the required testing dependencies with Maven. In the second part, we will take a quick look at the core components of the Spring MVC test framework. We will also learn what role these components play in a typical unit test. The third part describes how we can write unit tests for the controller of our example application. The first thing that we have to do is to get the required testing dependencies. Let's see how we can do this. We can get the required testing dependencies by declaring the following testing dependencies in our POM file. Jackson Core version 2.2.1 and Jackson DataBind version 2.2.1. We use Jackson when we are transforming objects into URL encoded string objects. Hamcrest All 1.3. We use Hamcrest matches when we are writing assertions for the responses. JUnit version 4.11. We must exclude the Hamcrest Core dependency because we already added the Hamcrest All dependency. Mockito Core version 1.9.5. We use Mockito as our mocking library. The last dependency which we have to add is Spring Test version 3.2.3. Release. Let's take a quick look at the core components of the Spring MVC test framework and see what role these components play in our unit tests. Every unit test which tests the behavior of a controller method consists of two steps. 1. We send a request which is processed by the tested controller method. 2. We verify that we received the expected response. The Spring MVC test framework has a few core classes which we can use for implementing these steps in our tests. These classes are described in the following. We can build our requests by using the static methods of the mock MVC request builders class. These methods return request builder objects which are passed as a method parameter to the method which executes the actual request. The mock MVC class is the main entry point of our tests. We can execute requests by calling its perform method. This method takes a request builder object as a method parameter. We can write assertions against the received response by using the static methods of the mock MVC result matchers class. Next, we'll write some unit tests for our example application and see the core components of Spring MVC test framework in action. During this video, we'll write unit tests for three controller methods. I selected these methods because I think that A. Writing tests for these methods gives us a relatively good idea about the usage of Spring MVC test framework. B. The other controller methods are pretty similar than the tested methods. In other words, writing tests for these methods would not add any value to this video. The tested controller methods are: the first controller method renders a page which shows a list of to-do entries. The second controller method renders the page which shows the information of a single to-do entry. The third controller method processes the form submissions of the add new to-do entry form. First, we'll write a unit test for a controller method which renders a to-do entry list page. Let's start by checking out the implementation of this method. We are looking at the implementation of the controller method which renders the to-do entry list page. The implementation of this controller method consists of following steps. 1. It processes GET requests sent to the web application root. 2. It gets the to-do entries by calling the findAll method of the to-do service interface. This method returns a list of to-do objects. 3. It adds the received list to the model. 4. It returns the name of the rendered view. Let's find out how we can write unit test for this controller method. We can write an unit test for this controller method by following these steps. 1. Create the test data which is returned when our service method is called. 2. Configure the used mock object to return the created test data when its findAll method is called. 3. Execute a GET request to the web application root. 4. Ensure that the HTTP status code 200 is returned. 5. Ensure that the name of the returned view is todo/list. 6. Verify that the request is forwarded to URL /webinf/JSP/todo/list.jsp. 7. Verify that the model attribute called todos has 2 items in it. 8. Ensure that the model attribute called todos contains the correct items. 9. Verify that the findAll method of our mock object was called only once. 10. Ensure that the other methods of our mock object were not called during our test. Second, we'll write unit tests for the controller method which renders the to-do entry page. This page shows the information of a single to-do entry. Let's move on and find out how the controller method is implemented. The controller method which is used to show the information of a single to-do entry is implemented by following these steps. 1. It processes GET request sent to URL /todo/ID. The ID inside the curly brackets is a path variable which contains the ID of the requested to-do entry. 2. It obtains the requested to-do entry by calling the findById method of the to-do service interface. The ID of the requested to-do entry is passed as a method parameter. This method returns the found to-do entry. If no to-do entry is found, this method throws a to-do not found exception. 3. It adds the found to-do entry to the model. 4. It returns the name of the rendered view. The obvious next question is, what happens when the to-do not found exception is thrown? We can find the answer to this question by taking a look at our application context configuration class. In the previous part of this tutorial, we created an exception handler bean, which is used to handle the exceptions thrown by our controller classes. As we can see, if a to-do not found exception is thrown, our application renders the error /404 view and returns the HTTP status code 404. It is now clear that we have to write two tests for this controller method. The first test ensures that everything is working when the requested to-do entry is not found. The second test ensures that everything is working when the requested to-do entry is found. Let's get to work. First, we have to ensure that our application is working properly when the to-do entry is not found. We can write the test which ensures this by following these steps. 1. Configure the mock object to throw a to-do not found exception when its findById method is called and the ID of the requested to-do entry is 1. 2. Execute a get request to URL /todo/1. 3. Verify that the HTTP status code 404 is returned. 4. Ensure that the name of the returned view is error /404. 5. Ensure that the request is forwarded to URL /webinf/jsp/error/404.jsp. 6. Verify that the findById method of the to-do service interface is called only once with the correct method parameter. 7. Verify that no other methods of the mock object were called during the test. Second, we must write a test which ensures that our application is working correctly when a to-do entry is found. We can do this by following these steps. 1. Create the to-do object which is returned when our service method is called. 2. Configure our mock object to return the created to-do object when its findById method is called by using a method parameter 1. 3. Execute a get request to URL /todo/1. 4. Verify that the HTTP status code 200 is returned. 5. Ensure that the name of the returned view is todo/view. 6. Ensure that the request is forwarded to URL /webinf/JSP/todo/view.jsp. 7. Verify that the ID of the model object called todo is 1. Verify that the description of the model object called todo is lorem ipsum. 9. verify that the title of the model object called todo is foo. Then ensure that the findById method of our mock object is called only once by using the correct method parameter. 11. Ensure that the other methods of our mock object were not called during our test. The last controller method which we are going to test processes the form submissions of the add to-do entry form. Let's start by taking a look at the implementation of this controller method. The controller method which handles the form submissions of the add to do form is implemented by following these steps. 1. We use the session attributes annotation to ensure that our form object is stored to the session. 2. Our controller method processes post request sent to URL /todo/add. 3. It checks that the binding result object given as a method parameter doesn't have any errors. If errors are found, our controller method returns the name of the form view. 4. It adds a new to-do entry to the database by calling the add method of the to-do service interface and passes the form object as a method parameter. This method creates a new to-do entry and returns the created to-do entry. 4. It creates the feedback message about the added to-do entry and adds the message to the redirect attributes object given as a method parameter. 5. It adds the ID of the added to-do entry to the redirect attributes object. 6. It returns the name of a redirect view which redirects the requests to the view to-do entry page. This controller method uses a to-do DDO object as a form object. The to-do DDO class is a simple DDO class which declares some validation constraints. These constraints are described in the following. The title of a to-do entry cannot be empty. The maximum length of the description is 500 characters. The maximum length of the title is 100 characters. Now, if we think about the tests which we should write for this controller method, it's clear that we must ensure that 1. The controller method is working properly when validation fails. 2. The controller method is working properly when a to-do entry is added. Let's find out how we can write these tests. First, we have to write a test which ensures that our controller method is working properly when validation fails. We can write this test by following these steps. 1. Create a title which has 101 characters. 2. Create a description which has 501 characters. 3. Create a new to-do DDO object and set the title and the description of the object. 4. Execute a post request to URL /todo/add. Set the content type of the request to application/x www form URL encoded. Ensure that the content of our form object is sent in the body of the request. Set the form object into session. 5. Verify that the HTTP status code 200 is returned. 6. Verify that the name of the returned view is todo/add. 7. Verify that the request is forwarded to URL /webinf/jsp/todo/add.jsp. 8. Verify that our model attribute has field errors in the title and description fields. 9. Ensure that the ID of our model attribute is null. 10. Ensure that the description of our model attribute is correct. 11. Ensure that the title of our model attribute is correct. 12. Ensure that the methods of our mock object were not called during the test. Our test case calls a few static methods of the testUtil class. These methods are described in the following. The first method is the convert object to form URL encoded bytes. This method converts the object given as a parameter into form URL encoded string object by using Jackson. After this is done, the method returns the content of the string object as a byte array. The second utility method is the createStringWithLength method, which creates a new string object with the given length and returns the created object. This class is also used in the second test. Let's move on and take a closer look at that test. Second, we have to write a test which verifies that our controller method is working properly when a new to-do entry is added to the database. We can write this test by following these steps. 1. Create a new form object. Set legal values to the title and description fields. 2. Create a to-do object which is returned when the add method of the to-do service interface is called. 3. Configure our mock object to return the created to-do object when its add method is called and the created form object is given as a method parameter. 4. Execute a post request to URL /todo/add. Set the content type of the request to application/xwww form URL encoded. Ensure that the content of our form object is sent in the body of the request. Set the form object into session. 5. Verify that the HTTP status code 302 is returned. 6. Ensure that the name of the returned view is redirect todo/id inside the curly brackets. 7. Ensure that the request is redirected to URL /todo/1. 8. Verify that the model attribute called ID is 1. 9. Verify that the feedback message is set. 10. Verify that the add method of our mock object is called only once and that the form object was given as a method parameter. 11. Verify that no other methods of the mock object were called during the test. Let's spend a moment to summarize what we learned from this video. First, we learned to create requests which are processed by the tested controller methods. Second, we learned to write assertions for the responses returned by the tested controller methods. Third, we learned how we can write unit tests for controller methods, which renders a view. Fourth, we learned to write unit tests for controller methods, which handles form submissions. That's all for today. You can get the example application of this tutorial from my website www.petrikainulainen.net. I have also added a link to the description of this video. If you enjoyed watching this video, you might want to follow me at Twitter. My Twitter handle is @petrikainulainen. Thanks for watching. Hei hei!